Hey guys, it's Lorie, and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to share with you guys all the books I read in the month of February. I actually had a really good reading month. I'm really surprised because it was like midterms, and I know in my TBR video for this month I kind of said that I wasn't probably going to meet my expectations or like my personal expectations for my TBR, but I ended up reading all the books except for one that I DNF'd, which I will talk about later. And then I actually read an extra one that wasn't initially on my TBR. So without further ado, let's get into the books. So the first book that I finished this month is actually Forest of a Thousand Lanterns by Julie C. Dow. And I was actually pleasantly surprised with how good this book was. So Julie C. Dow is actually a new author, and this is her debut novel, and oh my gosh, this was so amazing. So this is a story of the evil queen, like an evil queen retelling set in an East Asian setting. The main character is Shifeng, I believe. It took me a while to like get used to the way it's actually pronounced versus the way I was saying it in my head. But anyway, Shifeng is the main character, and she kind of was going through a life of pain living with her aunt, and her aunt was kind of abusive towards her, and she was just not living a very good life. She starts having visions and starts seeing that she is actually meant to be the empress of this kingdom. So basically she goes on a personal journey trying to become the empress, like basically come from nothing to becoming empress of this land. And since it is about the evil queen, like an evil queen retelling, she is a anti-hero, so she's not exactly a hero, a very good person. She does some really questionable things, and there's a lot of really kind of gory, evil things going on in this book, but oh my gosh, it's really good. If you're into like anti-heroes and just villains, like a villain story basically, you'll really enjoy this. Julie C. Dow's writing is so like vivid, she's really descriptive, and this was just really good. I personally love learning about villains, like I love villain stories, so this was something very different that I had never really seen before. I haven't really seen anything like this done. Like I think there's some evil queen retellings, but I haven't read them yet. This was actually my first one, and it was just really unique. So I believe I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. I believe, I think it was either a 3.5 or a 4 stars, but I really enjoyed it. There's going to be a sequel too, so I'm looking forward to that. So the next book that I read this month was Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. I finally finished the Six of Crows duology, and wow, this sequel was phenomenal. It was so good. It wrapped up the story really nicely, and of course we got more of the amazing characters that Leigh Bardugo is so good at crafting. I believe the ending too was really satisfying, and also I felt rewarded for reading the Grisha trilogy before reading this. Like, I know a lot of people say that you don't have to read the Grisha trilogy to read this series, but personally I felt really rewarded. If I hadn't have read the Grisha trilogy, then there's some things in this book that I wouldn't have felt like on the inside, if that makes any sense. So I definitely recommend, if you're going to go into this series, if you can, read the Grisha trilogy, because you'll feel rewarded, and there's some things that happen in this book that you'll understand a little bit better if you have read the original Grisha trilogy. So I don't want to talk too much about this one since this is a sequel and it's a duology, so basically it kind of spoils the first book, but it was amazing. I loved it. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. Really love this world and these characters, and I'm just looking forward to Leigh Bardugo's Nikolai book that's coming out, I believe, in 2019. Like, I can't wait for that book. So the next book that I read this month is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. So this book wasn't initially on my TBR for this month, but I was pretty in the mood for this. I went and saw Black Panther this month, and I absolutely adored it. It was an amazing movie and probably one of my new favorite movies. And I was feeling really just empowered by that, and I wanted something else to make me feel even more empowered. So I finally picked this up, and I've been meaning to. I've had this on my TBR for a long time now, but as I've mentioned in previous videos, I'm a mood reader. So I was finally in the mood for it, and I'm so glad I read it. This book is about our main character named Star, and she is an African American who basically lives in a really kind of crappy part of town. Her parents actually put her into a predominantly white school because they wanted her to go to a better school, basically, like not a school in her neighborhood. So she attends this party with her friends, and one of her childhood friends named Khalil is there. And after some events happen at the party, Khalil is actually shot by the police. He didn't do anything to deserve being killed, basically. And she was the one that witnessed it. She saw everything happen. She was an eyewitness. She knows that Khalil didn't do anything wrong. So basically she's going through life kind of dealing with the aftermath of what happened to Khalil and how people are treating him after he was murdered and how people are treating her as well, which is not very good. So this book absolutely blew me away. This was so amazing. It really showcases what African Americans have to go through. It showcases that racism is still a huge issue, and there's like just so many examples of like everyday occurrences that people don't really think about. People consider these little jokes to be like not harmful to people of color, but in all seriousness, you are probably hurting them. And of course, people of color are like thinking that it's okay and it's normal because they don't want to speak out. This book really, really empowered me and basically made me feel like speaking out is just so important. Like, I already knew that saying your feelings and speaking out about important events is obviously important, but there's just like so many little examples, like just little things that you'd be like, oh, I don't have to say anything about that because it's like so small. But really, it's not small and you should really speak out about it. I don't want to give too many specific examples because I don't want to spoil the book, but this was great. And it just gives you a different perspective. Like if you're somebody who doesn't have any close friends who are, you know, people of color, or you've never personally been through something that Star has been through, it just really showcases her experiences and just gives you a completely different perspective, a new perspective that will open your eyes. Also, I just want to say too, because I have mentioned it in a video, that I am part Black, and when I was younger, I actually grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood. It was known as like the ghetto. And there are a lot of things in this book that I could really relate to. Like, I walked home from school when I think I was like 8 years old, and my school was not even 5 minutes away. It was literally super close. I was living with my grandmother, and it was so close. And I walked home from school, and she literally was crying, yelling at me, and told me that I could never walk home from school. Of course, I was a privileged child. I had no idea what she was angry about, what she was so upset about, until, you know, I got older and realized, oh, she was angry because something could have happened to me. It was dangerous. So things like that. There's just like little things in this book that I could really, really relate to because I grew up in that type of neighborhood. So this was great. I read this super, super fast. I highly, highly recommend this book. I actually kind of wish that like more people would just read it because it's such a great experience. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read this month is actually The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. This book was also amazing. I'm just noticing that I had a really, really good month of reading. Like, everything was so good. But this is one of my new favorite books of all time. This blew my mind. So this is about our main character, Jude, and when she was 7 years old, she witnessed her parents' murder. Her parents were murdered by a fairy who claimed to be her oldest sister's father. So after her parents were murdered, this fairy stole Jude and her 2 sisters away to live in the high court of fairyland, which in itself is pretty uncomfortable, living with your parents' murder. But she dealt with it quite nicely, even though her entire childhood was awkward and she didn't really like it. She kind of grew to accept it and be okay, basically, with her adoptive father. Anyway, so she's living in fairy, she's older now, and there is this court and all this political intrigue and lots of stuff happening within the High Court of Fairy. There's also a lot of bullying going on in fairy. One of the princes of the court bullies her to no end. Like, obviously he's a cruel prince. Him and his friends are really mean to her and her sister, and it's just a really unpleasant experience for Jude. But basically, there is just a lot of political intrigue in this, which I love. I love political intrigue so much. It's one of the main reasons why I love Game of Thrones. There's just a lot of like deceitfulness, a lot of like cleverness going on. There's a lot of Slytherin-ness going on. It's honestly like a really Slytherin-y book, to be honest. Also, this was my first book that I've read by Holly Black, and her writing is amazing. She's a fantastic writer. Like every description of fairy, I felt like I was there. Every description of the food, like the fairy fruit, I felt like I was eating it and I kind of wanted to eat it, to be completely honest. It sounded really good. All of the other food, the smells, just everything, the animals. It was all so vivid and I felt like I was there. This was just amazing writing, and I'm actually looking forward to reading more of Holly Black's books now. So I really love this. I think I've been seeing some mixed things. I don't know. It's weird because like some people are just like, this is great, this is amazing, and they're shouting from the rooftop saying it's great, and then other people on the other hand are saying they don't like it that much or it didn't live up to their expectations. Personally, I think this book was very, very, very hyped, and I think that's probably the problem, is that it's just a very, very hyped up book. And if you are feeling super hyped going into this, just be careful because it might not live up to your expectations, I guess. For me, it definitely did. It was right up my alley. Like everything was perfect for me. So that's all I'm gonna say about that. If you haven't read it yet and you're like, there's a lot of hype, I'm a little nervous, just try and go into it with an open mind. Also, if you haven't heard much about it, which I highly doubt you haven't since this has been all over BookTube, just also try and go into it a little bit blind too, because that'll help. I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. And the last book that I read this month was actually Gemina by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. This is the second book in the Illuminae files, and this was just as good as the first book, which is pretty big to say because some sequels don't end up living up to the hype of their first book. Although I say that, and then I'm thinking of like Akatar, which the second book was a hell of a lot better than the first, and what else? I know there's other books too, or other series rather, where the second book was like so much better than the first. But yeah, this was just really great, and it was honestly just as good. I was personally nervous too because this introduced a whole new cast of characters. The original characters that were in Illuminae don't even show up until like kind of the end of the book. So I was nervous about that too, but the new cast of characters was great. Like, I think I actually liked them a little bit more than the original cast of characters in the first book. Also, I just want to mention too that I buddy read this book with Mystics Library and G Nitro, two of some of my really good friends who also really love reading. I really enjoyed buddy reading with them because we kind of went through all of the same emotions together and we all really loved this book. We're probably gonna buddy read Obsidio, which comes out, I think, in the beginning of March, I believe. Comes out really soon. I can't wait. But yeah, I'm not going to go too much into this one because, once again, it is a sequel. I don't want to spoil the first book if you haven't read it yet, but it is a sci-fi. It has a great cast of characters. It's very unique in that it doesn't read like a traditional book because there's a lot of illustrations in here. Most of the reading is actually conversations from like a chat or past like emails, and just really crazy good illustrations that just kind of make you think. It's a very, very unique reading experience. Also, I recommend these audiobooks too if you're thinking about picking this series up, because the audiobooks are another completely different experience, and the audiobooks are just really, really, really good. They have like a full cast of characters, and there's like sound effects, there's music. It's like listening to a movie. It's just really, really great. So I gave Gemina a 5 out of 5 stars. This was amazing. So those were all the books that I read in the month of February. Once again, I had a really great month of reading. I didn't think I was going to get through my entire TBR, and I actually added an extra book. Now, I will say, if some of you guys watched my TBR for February, that I did have one book on there that I didn't read because I DNF'd it. And that book is Scarlet by Marissa Meyer. I know some of you are gonna be so upset at me. Some of you guys might hate me, hopefully not. But I'm gonna go into a completely different video as to why I DNF'd the entire Lunar Chronicles series. I know, once again, you guys are gonna be really upset. A lot of you guys will be. I hope you'll still be friends with me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. What did you guys read in the month of February? Let me know down in the comments below. If you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a legendary thumbs up and subscribe for more videos in the future. I will see you guys next time. Have a wonderful day. Bye!